There we are.
Okay, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we had a little bit of chapter three left, right?
Yeah, and then we were gonna go over two. I did, he did a little bit of two in the lecture. I went back and I looked. There wasn't anything super
It's probably
complex.
the PPF, right?
Yeah, it was just the PPF. So nothing super complicated that I didn't understand.
Okay. I mean, it's up to you. We can go over it quickly if you want. If you're good with it, then we
Sure.
can just move on as well. Whatever you'd like.
Yeah, just a quick skim through would be great.
Yeah. And then there was chapter one appendix as well, I think, in your notes.
Yeah, I can go back and I should go into the thing and check right now.
Okay, so any questions from the stuff that we did last time or no? You good?
No, all good.
Okay. Uh, yeah, so the main, I think the most important part was the graphs, right? And understanding how when one variable changes, right? So one of these, the five that we did,
Hmm.
if one of those changes, what impact does it have on the demand curve? Is it a
Right.
upward movement, downward movement, rightward shift, or leftward shift? Right? Those are the four essentially possibilities that you have. So the more that you practice, the more problems that you go through. Ideally, you should, as soon as you read it, right? For example, if I say if the price of a substitute good goes up, like within a few seconds, you should have like the demand, like the graph in your head. Okay, this is what the curve will look like. No? So that
Yep.
should be the now. So we did the demand side. So now we'll do the supply side, and this will be much easier to grasp because we've done the demand side already, and it's going to be very similar in terms of how we analyze it. It's just going to be the opposite side of the market. So a lot of the stuff is just going to be reversed. So it's going to be pretty easy to grasp.
Okay.
So in the demand side, the first thing that we did, if you remember, was the difference between demand and quantity demanded, right? We said that the entire demand schedule is the demand, whereas, for example, here, now obviously we're looking at supply. So the entire supply schedule would be the supply. Whereas if you pick any particular price and quantity, for example, if you pick 707, then that will be the quantity supplied, meaning
Okay.
that quantity supplied is a point on the supply curve. So if you look at the supply curve, obviously it's the opposite of a demand curve, right? So demand curve was a downward sloping line indicating a negative relationship between price and demand, right? So in this case, it's going to
Yep.
be an upward sloping curve, indicating a positive relationship between price and quantity supply. Meaning as the price goes up, the sellers want to sell more, and if the price goes down, the sellers want to obviously sell less, right? So it's an upward
Yeah.
sloping line, and this whole supply curve represents supply, whereas any particular point on the supply curve represents quantity supplied. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So pretty
Yeah.
pretty
Okay.
similar to the demand side.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is the law of supply. Again, pretty similar to the law of demand, just it's going to be inversed. So the law of demand stated that ceteris paribus, meaning assuming that everything else remains constant, there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Now here it's going to be the inverse. So ceteris paribus, there's going to be a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied of a good. Okay?
It sounds good. I'm just gonna should be turning my camera off a few times because I need to use a tissue eventually, but
Yeah, yeah, you're good.
I'm still here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's the law of supply. Then we'll look at the variables that can shift market supply. Okay, so same way that when we looked at demand, if there's if we have price here and quantity supply here, this is our supply curve.
Hmm.
So if there's a change in the price of the good itself, that's always going to result in a movement along the supply curve. Okay, so let's say this is point A, price is $10, quantity supplied is 100. Let's say price goes up to 15, quantity supplied goes up to 150. So you move from point A to point B on the supply curve, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
would be an upward movement along the supply curve. Okay, so when the price goes up, there's an upward movement along the supply curve. And when the price
Okay.
goes down, let's say to 5, quantity goes down, quantity supplied goes down to 50. So that's point C. So now you're moving down along the supply curve. Okay, so when the price goes down, there's a downward movement along the supply curve.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
So these are the two cases when there's a movement along the supply curve. And then the other case obviously is when there's a shift in the supply curve. And as we discussed in the demand side, a shift in the curve only happens when something else other than the price changes. Okay, so now we'll look at those things that can result in a shift in the supply curve. Okay,
Okay.
so these are our variables. So we have prices of inputs, technological change, prices of substitute, number of firms, and expected future prices. Okay, so some are similar expected future prices we had in the demand side as well, for example, right? But obviously the way it will impact the supply curve is going to be different. So we'll start with the prices of inputs. So this is one of the primary factors that affect supply, right? Since
Mm-hmm.
now obviously you're putting yourself in the shoes of the supplier. So your biggest factor of production is your inputs, right? So the prices of the inputs is a big factor influencing how much of a good you're going to be able to supply. Okay. So let's say the
Okay.
price of inputs goes up. So this input can be, I mean, there's a lot of inputs, right? So we discussed this in chapter one when we were discussing all the terms and all the ideas, right? So we have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, if you remember, the four factors of production. So those will be your inputs, right? So in this
Yeah.
case, let's take labor, for example. Okay. So what's the price of labor? It's going to be the salary that you pay the labor, right? So let's
Yeah.
say the price of inputs, for example, in this case, the salary that you're paying your employees goes up. Okay.
Okay.
It could be any reason, right? Let's say the minimum wage goes up, so you have to pay your employees more. So what happened then? So your price of inputs now has gone up, meaning that your cost of production has now increased, right? If your
Yep.
cost of production has increased and we're assuming that the price stays the same, right? If we're looking at a shift
Yeah.
of the supply curve, we're assuming that the price line stays the same. That's how the curve's going to shift, right? To the right or to the left. The price is going to stay the same. So the price is the same, but your cost has gone up. So what does that mean? That means that your profit margins are going down, right? The price that you're selling at
Mhm.
stays the same, but your cost is increasing. That means that your profit margins are going down. And if you're making less profit, then would you want to supply more or less?
Less.
Less. So your supply goes down. Okay? So when the price of inputs goes up, the quantity supplied goes down. So that's a negative relationship. Okay? And
Okay.
likewise, vice versa, if the price of inputs goes down, then your cost of production is going to go down. Your profit margins are going to go up. And then obviously you would want to supply more. Okay.
All right.
So in this case, for example, when the price of inputs went down, do you want to try drawing the supply curve? This is our price, this is our quantity supplied. This is our supply curve to begin with, right? Let's call it S1.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go with the same example. The price of the good is 10 and it stays at 10, right? But if the price of the inputs is going up, we said you would want to supply less. Okay, so let's say if you were supplying 100 units before, now you would want to supply less, right? Let's say now you want to supply 50. So now you're here. Now you're at this point, even though the price is the same. So that means there's going to be a new supply curve, S2, which is a
Yep.
leftward shift from S1. Okay, so when the
Okay.
price of inputs goes up, that results in a leftward shift in the supply curve. If the price of the inputs goes
Perfect.
down, that's going to result in a, now you want to supply more. So you're at this point. So it's a rightward shift in the supply curve from S1 to S3.
All right.
So that's our first variable is the prices of inputs. The second one is technological. Does that make sense? Any questions?
All good.
Okay. The second one is technological change. Um, so as technology evolves, usually in most cases, you're becoming more efficient, right? If you're operating new technologies coming in, it's usually going to be more efficient, which will result in, so let's say there's a new tech, which is more efficient. So your cost of production is now going to go down because it's more efficient. If your cost of production is going down, that means that your profit margins are going up, and then you would want to supply more. Okay, so that's the relationship between technology and quantity supplied. And it can work the other way as well. So if there's a negative technological change, which is, as we said, relatively rare, usually technology is going to be for the better. But if it does happen, then your cost of production is going to go up, your profit margins are going to go down, and you would want to supply less. And it's going to be a leftward shift in the supply curve, right?
All right.
Okay, so that's our second one. Then the third one is prices of substitutes. So we did this on the demand side as well, but now it's going to work a bit different. So on the demand side, when we said substitutes, obviously in that case you were the consumer, right? So substitutes meant alternative goods that you would want to consume, right?
Okay.
I think we did, what was
Yep.
it, steak and ground beef, right?
Yeah, I
So
think so.
in this case now, you're the producer, okay? So when we say substitutes, that's not what we mean. What we mean is when we say substitutes, we imply other goods that you could be producing. Okay, so again, in chapter one, we did the idea of scarcity, right? So that's going to come in here
Mhm.
as well. So when you're a producer, you only have a limited amount of resources, right? You know, obviously you don't
All
have
right.
unlimited resources. So you have to decide where to put those resources to produce what good, right? So as you so you have multiple types of goods that you can produce, right? Or multiple variations of the good that you can produce. So as the producer, you have to decide what's the best allocation of those resources. Okay, so that's what we mean by substitutes. So,
Okay.
for example, the example that I give here is, mm, I guess, Wi-Fi or cellular network, right? So if you're selling mm, tablets, right? So, for example, if you're selling iPads, so you have the Wi-Fi version and you have the cellular version, right? So
Yeah.
those would be an example of substitutes for the producer, right? So let's say if we're looking at the Wi-Fi version, okay? So if the price of the cellular version of the tablet goes up, then the cellular version becomes more profitable for you, right? So your profit
Hmm.
margins on the cellular version goes up. So you would want to supply more of the cellular version and less of the Wi-Fi version, right? So the price of the substitute good goes up, then the quantity supplied for the given good goes down. Because the other good then
Okay.
becomes more attractive for you as the producer to produce, right? Because that good is becoming more profitable. You can charge more for that. So you'd want to put more of your resources toward that good, which would imply less resources left for this good. So the supply for this good will go down. Okay. And
All
then
right.
what would happen to the supply curve then in this case?
It would move down. I would move to the left.
Move to the left, shift to the left.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was our third one. The fourth one is the number of firms in the market. So this is sort of the supply side version of population that we did here, right? So when we did population on the demand side, it's sort of
Right.
the supply side version of that is the number of firms in the
Okay.
market, right? So the more firms there are in the market, um, the more supply of that product overall they can produce. So when the number of firms in the market goes up, the supply goes up and the curve shifts to the right. And when the firms leave the market or exit the market, then the overall supply for the market goes down and the supply curve will shift to the left. Right? Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
And then the last one is expected future prices. So again, we did this on the demand side as well. But here it's going to work the opposite. Okay. Because when you're the consumer, if you, for example, if you expect the price in the future to go up, then today you would demand uh, more, right? Because the price is going to go up more in the future, then you would want to stock up today and your demand would go up today. Um, but on the supply side, it's going to be opposite, right? Because if you expect the price in the future to be higher, then you would want to sell less today, right? Save up more for the future when the price is higher, sell more then, so you make more money in the future.
Mhm. Right.
So, let's say, so if you expect the price in this case, we're expecting the price to go down in the future. So, uh, oh wait, no, sorry, you're expecting the price to be higher in the future. So today you would want to sell less. So that results in a leftward shift in the supply curve because you'd want to supply less today. So the supply goes down, right, from here to here without a change in the price, and you would want to sell less today. So the curve shifts to the left. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so these are the five variables on the supply side. Okay, so just take a look at these five again. If you have any
Hmm.
questions, otherwise we can move on.
All right. Nope, looks good to me.
Okay, this we've discussed already pretty much, right? Change in supply versus quantity supplied. Change in supply is going to be a shift in the supply curve. Change in quantity supplied is going to be a movement along the supply curve, right? Yep.
Yeah, all good.
All right. So now we're done with both the demand and supply side. So we can put them together to actually find the equilibrium for the market. Okay. So we have a downward sloping demand curve. We have an upward sloping supply curve. Where the two curves intersect is the point that we call the market equilibrium. So this point is where trade actually happens. Okay. It's meaning where the
Okay.
buyers and the sellers both settle on a price and a quantity, and that's the quantity of the good that's being traded at that specific price. Okay, so that's what we call the market equilibrium. So in
Okay.
this case, 5 million tablets are being sold in the market at a price of $500 per tablet. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at disruptions of the equilibrium and see how the market returns back to equilibrium. Um, so the market always has to return back to a state of equilibrium for trade to happen, right? You can't have a situation where either the buyer or the sellers, they both have to give up something, sacrifice something, make um, to actually get to a point where trade happens, right? So a trade has to happen in the market. So an equilibrium has to be achieved. So we now will look at cases where we're not in equilibrium and then how we end up back at equilibrium. Okay, so there's two market disruptions that can happen. One is a surplus and the other one is a shortage. Yeah. So this is
Okay.
important. You'll definitely see a few questions on this on your exam.
Okay.
Okay, so this is our market equilibrium. Okay, so as we discussed, this was our point of equilibrium, 500, price of 500, and the quantity was 5 million tablets being sold, right? So let's look at surplus first. Okay, so let's say the market is not in equilibrium. Okay, so if the market is not in equilibrium, then there can only be two cases. Either demand is higher than supply or supply is higher than demand. Okay, so when we talk about a surplus here, we're talking about supply being higher than demand. Okay, so meaning
Okay.
the quantity of the good that the suppliers have in their inventories is higher than the demand that the buyers have for that product, right?
Okay.
So that's what we call surplus.
All right.
So, mm, okay, so if you look at this line here, right, we see that the supply is at 6 million, right? So you see where this price line intersects the supply curve right here. That gives you
Yeah.
the supply, which is 6 million. And then you look at where this line intersects the demand curve, which is the blue curve, right here. So this is our demand at that price, okay? So the difference between 4 million and 6 million, which is 2 million, is our surplus, okay? So when we're in the situation of surplus, as we said, the market is not stable when we're not in equilibrium. Okay, so the market always returns back to a state of equilibrium. So when we have a surplus, we'll see how the market eventually returns back to equilibrium. So when you have a surplus of a good, what happens? As we said, the suppliers have more stock of that good than they would like to have, right? That's what surplus means essentially. So if they have too much inventory, what are they going to do? And they want to get rid of it. The suppliers will start reducing the price, right? They'll start putting up sales to start getting rid of that inventory, right? So if the price is at 600 right now, and the price is going to start coming down, right? So the suppliers
Okay.
are going to start reducing the price. So as you reduce the price, what happens? As the price of the product goes down, there's a downward movement along the supply curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a downward movement along the demand curve. So if you look
To
at
meet
it
equilibrium.
yeah, so the downward movement along the demand curve means that buyers want to buy more, right? Demand is increasing and supply is decreasing until they reach back at that point of equilibrium. Okay, so
Okay.
essentially when there's too much of the good, uh, the producers want to get rid of their inventory. So to do that, they're going to start reducing the price of the product. As they start reducing the price, the buyers see that and they want to buy more. So the demand starts increasing and their inventories start going down because they're selling more. So both of those forces combine together to reach back at the point of equilibrium. Okay,
All right.
and then the other scenario is going to be shortage. Okay, so let's say now the price is at 300. So 500 is our, okay, so basically the 500 is our equilibrium we know, right? So if we're not at equilibrium, either it's because the price is higher than 500 or it's lower than 500. When it's higher, it's a surplus. When it's lower, it's a shortage. Okay, so in this case, we're looking at 300 as an example. So all you do is you draw a price line, right? So you take the 300 point, you extend that line through the graph, and you see where it intersects supply and demand. So it intersects the supply. That's how much the suppliers are willing to sell at a price of 300, right? 3 million.
Okay.
And now you see where it intersects demand at 7. That's how much the buyers want to buy at that price. Obviously, when the price goes down, buyers want to buy more, right? So buyers want to buy
Right.
7 million, but the sellers only want to sell 3 million. So what is that? That's a shortage, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
means there's a shortage of 4 million tablets, right? So when there's a
Right.
shortage, what are the sellers going to do? If there's a shortage of a good, that means that good is more exclusive, right? They see there's demand for it. So they're going to
Mm-hmm.
start producing more, right, to fulfill that supply. And they're going to start increasing the prices because buyers are willing to pay more. The buyers are competing for the market, right? Because the price is too low. So as the price, so they'll start increasing the price. So as they start increasing the price, what happens? The demand is going to start decreasing, right?
Yeah.
As the price starts going up, the buyers want to buy less and less of the good. As the price starts going up, now more sellers start entering the market, right? Because the price starts going up, it becomes more attractive. So the quantity supply starts to increase. until you return back to the point of equilibrium.
All right.
So that is shortage. So we have surplus and shortage are the two cases where equilibrium is disrupted. And in the model that we created and the assumptions that we have, a competitive market is always going to return back to the point of equilibrium. Okay, and we just saw how that happens.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Any questions?
Nope. So far, so good.
Okay.
Luckily, this stuff is a lot of it is just review of micro, just putting in different terms.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this you'll
All
definitely
right.
see at least 2 to 3 questions on the exam, I would say.
Okay. Awesome. This stuff I have a pretty good grasp on, because like I said, it's really similar to microeconomics in respect of just the way that the graphs look, and
Yeah,
it's a few just different terms being swapped in for other ones, but other than that, it should be fine.
yeah, it's mostly just like, well, I mean, as we move through the course, there's definitely going to be new stuff, but
Yeah.
for now, we're just, looking at similar things just from a macro perspective, right? So
Right.
looking at the whole market, for example, instead of looking at one consumer or one uh, producer.
Right.
I think this should be the last section. Yeah. Okay. So the last thing that we'll look at in this chapter is the effect of shifts in demand and supply curves on the equilibrium. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So let's take a look at this example here. So we're looking at, again, tablets. So we have our demand curve, which is the blue curve, and S1 is our original supply curve. Okay.
Okay.
So the equilibrium point is right here, right? Where
Yep.
demand curve intersects with the S1 curve. So that's a price of P1 and a quantity of Q1. So that's our equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, respectively. Okay. Now,
Okay.
for some reason, right, for one of so we had the 5 variables that we discussed, right, that can shift the supply curve, the price of inputs, technology, price of substitutes, all of those. So because of one of those things changing, the supply curve in this case shifts to the right. For example, let's say the
Okay.
price of inputs went down. So your cost of production went down, profit margins went up, and you want to supply more. So the supply curve will shift to the right, right?
All right.
Well, now we have a new supply curve as 2, right? And the new equilibrium point is now going to be where, so demand hasn't changed, only supply has changed, right? So where the original blue demand curve intersects the S2, which is the new supply curve, right here. So this is going to
Okay.
be our new equilibrium point. Okay, so E1, let's say, was our original equilibrium point, and then E2 was our new equilibrium point. And then the price and the quantities corresponding with E2, which is P2 and Q2, are
Right.
our new equilibrium price and quantities. Okay, so the price went down and the quantity went up.
Perfect.
Okay, so basically for each, um, so there's a bunch of scenarios that can happen, right? So in this case, we assume that demand the demand curve didn't shift, but the demand curve can shift as well. So both demand and supply curves can shift. In that case, you have to look at which one of the demand or supply curve shifts more. That's going to be the more dominant effect. There's going to be a lot of factors, but you essentially just need to be able to find the new equilibrium point and be able to state what's happening to the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so do you want to try? mm, So we can try keeping the supply curve the same and shifting the demand curve. Do you want to try that? Let's say the demand curve, um, let's say there's a decrease in demand. So what would happen to the market equilibrium in that case?
There'd be a leftward shift in the demand curve.
right? And the supply curve, let's assume stays the same. Okay.
Okay. So that'll just create a new equilibrium more towards the left side of the graph because it's just the demand that's not necessarily just the demand that would change that, but let's say if the demand does move over, it just created an equilibrium that's more leftward of what it is now.
Yeah. Okay. So this was our original equilibrium, right? And we said there's a decrease in demand. So a decrease in demand implies a leftward shift in the demand curve,
So it'd be D2.
right? So with D2, which is a leftward shift. So now you have this
Yeah,
new equilibrium.
and
It's going to be E2. And then this is your
perfect.
new equilibrium price, P2 and Q2. So in this case, both the price and the quantity went down.
Okay, perfect.
Okay? So this is the more basic example, right? We can look at, I mean, I don't know if we're supposed to do it. Okay, we do. Yeah, so we can look at cases where both demand and supply change.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay, so let's say there's an increase in demand and there is an increase in supply as well. Okay, so just by looking at that, you know when there's an increase in demand, there's a rightward shift in the demand curve, right? When there's an increase in supply, there's a rightward shift in that. So what matters is how much it's changing. Okay, so which one is the more dominant one? So,
Right.
so now we have D1 and S1. This is our E1, P1, and Q1. This is our original equilibrium. Okay, so you can
Okay.
choose either one. Let's say in this case, the increase in demand is higher than the increase in supply. Okay, so simply what we'll do is so just because we're um, looking at analyzing it for the first time, we'll just exaggerate the change just to make it clear. Okay. So let's say demand changes by a lot. Okay. So we'll shift the demand curve by a lot like that.
Okay.
Okay. So it shifts to the right by a lot. Now let's say the supply curve doesn't shift by that much. So there is an increase in supply, but just for proving our point, we'll just increase it by a little bit. Okay. To S2. So now this is our new equilibrium point where D2 intersects with S2, right?
Right.
And then this is our Q2 and this is our P2. Okay, so the equilibrium price went up and the equilibrium quantity went up. Okay.
Okay.
So as I said, there's, a lot of cases that you could have here. It just depends on which one is the, so you can have decrease in demand and increase in supply, right? You can have the opposite as well. And you have decrease in demand, decrease in supply. There's a lot of cases. So if you actually get a problem where you have to like plot the curves and find the equilibrium, then they'll give you the numbers for the changes in demand supply, and you'll be able to tell which one is the more dominant one. And then you'll be able to draw this graph and do the analysis, right? And find the new equilibrium point.
Okay, perfect.
So the more basic cases are when only demand or supply is changing, we keep the other one constant. And then this is the more complex one where both change. When both change, you just look at which one changes by more, and that's going to be the main uh, effect on the graph, on the equilibrium. Okay.
All right.
So this table
Sorry, would
right,
you mind I'm just gonna step away for 2 seconds. It's so cold in my room right now. I just gotta grab a blanket.
yeah, you get
The the snow outside it just keeps coming down. So
what's the
I'm
temperature?
right now I'll
Yeah.
check. It's freezing in my room. I do not think that they have good heaters in this building. It's -12 right now, feels like -13.
Okay. I
So
feel
it's a
like
little chilly.
Guelph is always like a bit colder than. even like Toronto, for example, I felt like even though
Yeah,
it's
I
only
find that,
a drive away, but
sorry.
still it felt like significantly colder.
Yeah, I feel like it's because, well, because Toronto's a city and it's got more, the architecture is a lot
There's a lot
larger
more
than in
open
Guelph.
space, right? So yeah, the wind is stronger. It feels more colder.
Yeah, so I've got to go walk to class after this, but it's gonna be an adventure. I might have to bring a blanket with me to class.
Yeah, depending on your residence, those walks can be brutal.
Yeah, luckily I'm Mills, so I'm smack dab in the middle of campus essentially. Next,
Okay.
like, yeah, so everything's just couple couple steps away.
Yeah. First year classes are all around the campus usually, right? That's the thing.
Yeah,
Once you start getting into higher year, then for example, if you're in business, then most of the classes are going to be in McDonald Hall, for example, right? So
right.
in the first year, you have to walk a lot for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll have a car for second year, but it's a possibility.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Depends on how work goes this summer. And then if work goes well and I do well, we'll see if I can make it a bit of a long-term investment.
Yeah. I mean, when the weather is good, then it's pretty it's good, for it's a good exercise as well. But when yeah, during
Hmm.
the winters it can get rough.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
I think that's pretty much it for this chapter.
Ooh,
Um, I would say take a look at the questions that your prof goes through, right? And
okay.
the answers that they provide. If I mean, obviously, if we start going through that, then it's gonna take like a whole session just to do that. It's probably better you go through it yourself, and then if you run into any issues, then we can, go over those specific problems during the sessions. Okay?
Okay. Sounds good. I will do that today. I luckily I today's my is a nice day for me because I've got a class in the morning and then I've got a class in the evening from 7 to 10.
Yeah,
So I've got that good chunk of space to get a bunch of practice done.
yeah, yeah. I think you'll be able to do it. Seem to have a pretty good grasp on this chapter.
Yeah, it's been good so far. Also, just while I have it on my mind, test one, she's coming up. It's on the 20th, and um,
Like the
I was
weekly
just
quiz.
wondering. No, this is like a test.
Okay, how much is it worth?
Uh, let's see. Content.
You want me to share?
It's okay. Yeah, you're good. Um, let's see.
Mhm.
Try to find the breakdown. Oh, there it is. Tests are 40%.
40%.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
the quizzes are only 10%. Oh, everything's worth so much this semester. I don't know what it is with the courses, but I've got in my math course, I have two tests worth 25%, a
Yeah.
quiz that's worth 10%, one quiz worth 10%, and my final is worth 40%.
Mhm.
So
The
it's
math course is pretty easy to be honest. Especially
yeah,
if
it's not
you've
bad.
taken math in high school, then it shouldn't be too tough.
Yeah, I'm a little rusty right now because I haven't done I fast tracked in high school, so I did advanced functions in a grade 11 and then calc sem 1 of
Yeah.
grade 12. So it has been a very long time since I've done math of any sort. So, well, other than economics, which I find is a very different kind of math than what we're doing in the course.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to take a look and see how many tests there
How
are.
many how
There are
many tests do you have?
four tests, so that's
Okay, so
10% each.
10% each. Okay. And what chapters do you have on this one?
For this one, it is, if it loads, 1, 2.1, 3, 4, 5, and 5.1 through 3.
Mm. 3, 4, 5, and
Yeah, through 4, 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3.
okay.
So essentially what they covered in the first two lecture videos of the week. I
Yeah,
wrote, sorry, I don't know why I'm yawning so much today. Um, I wrote
it's pretty.
notes for both of those, so that should be good. But hopefully this test goes by pretty smoothly considering again, it's basically just review from micro. Obviously I'm going to be studying, but
Yep.
yeah.
So we
So I was
basically
wondering
have
for Friday
chapters
then.
4 and 5 to do before then,
Yeah. So for Friday, I was wondering if we could,
and 2.1 as well.
yeah, try and get through those. And then even, do you have any availability on the weekend to run through some stuff? Just kind of
Yeah, I
like,
should be able to.
okay, so possibly schedule
Um,
something.
yeah, like around this time, I can do pretty much every day.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, looking to schedule something in for the weekend.
Yeah,
Um, to just do some general overview of the chapters, kind of see if I have a good understanding. What
yeah.
that looks like, I'm not quite sure yet. Maybe just going through some chapter questions and seeing how that goes, but it should be it should be okay.
Chapter
Yeah.
5 is mostly theory.
Okay.
So I think the main content that like you need to go over with me is chapter 4 out of this. Like out of what's left. Chapter 4
Okay.
and 2.1. Like chapter 5, I mean obviously we'll go over it, but it shouldn't take that long.
Right.
Um yeah, like 2 sessions should be enough to cover everything that's left.
Okay,
2.1
perfect.
and yeah, we could do 2.1 and 5 in one session and then chapter 4 in one session.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Yeah, it's also just for to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. It's going to be 70 minutes. Um, and there's 42 questions of all multiple choice.
Yeah.
So that shouldn't way better than Adame's exam.
Yeah. I'll
Yeah,
try and
so
find, I think I have some, well, I have some midterms. So it won't be like all the exact chapters that you have, but we can like pick the questions out of the chapters on there and we can go over that as well.
that would be awesome.
Questions if you like. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
that'd be great.
take a
Thank
look at
you.
what there's a, I don't know if you know, there's a website as well that you can check. It's pretty
Okay.
outdated, but there's still stuff you can find. It's called guelphtestwall.com.
Sorry, say that one more time. Guelph what?
Guelphtestwall.com.
Guelph test wall.
Yeah, I'll put in the chat
Okay.
here. So it's I mean a lot of stuff is pretty outdated, but the professors are also pretty outdated usually.
Yeah.
They teach the same stuff for decades. So yeah, take a
Yeah.
look. Not only for this
Okay.
class, like there's resources for every class pretty much. You can find like notes and midterms and papers, a lot of stuff on there.
All right. Oh yeah, this is a great little site.
Yeah, just go to course resources and then you can find your course and then see what documents they have on there for it.
All right. Let's see. Macro.
Mm. Yeah, there's not much for Econ 1100, but there's a midterm from fall 2014. Midterms, quiz one.
Yeah, well, they even have notes. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for some courses that are more popular, you'll see like a lot of resources. Like micro probably has a lot more.
Yeah, that would
Micro's
make sense to
two-
me.
22 documents compared to four for macro. Even for your
Yeah.
like math courses and those courses, you can check this out. It's usually find some stuff on here.
Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
I will go through that because that seems like a fantastic resource. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, even on like other websites like Coursera and stuff, if you wanna take a look, if you find any, try to find from like exams from Guelph only, because the content can change a lot. It can be even if it's pretty old, it's still it can be pretty useful. So if you find anything, just send it over. I'll take a look. If it is relevant, then we can like go over that during a session as well.
All right, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, that seems good. I don't think that I think I've covered all my notes. I always have a plethora of sticky notes on put right behind my computer whenever I'm just to have little reminders if I need to talk to people about certain things. But no, I think that covers it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, two sessions should be enough for the content itself. When is it
Okay.
on?
Yeah, it's on Monday.
Okay. And then yeah, I mean, we'll try and find if we do find a midterm that we want to go over, then we can try and find a like scheduled session for that as well.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, that sounds great. All right,
All
well, thank you so much.
right.
I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah, you as well.
Um, Thank you very much, and I will see you on Friday. Friday
Fridays.
morning or
Yeah.
evening for you. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, have a good one.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. You too.